In today's PowerPoint, we are going to look at web design principles. So we're going to cover more theory about web design before we continue on in HTML and CSS. So when we talk about web design principles, we're actually looking at three things: usability, content, and visual design principles. So we'll take a look at usability first. Usability has to do with the effectiveness and efficiency in which your user, the person that's using your website, can achieve his or her goals on your website. So we'll be covering more about usability in our next PowerPoint, but in this PowerPoint, I'm just going to go over the basics. So usability has to do with your website being intuitive. It needs to have good content structure, needs to be consistent throughout your website. You should follow standards for your website and always provide feedback for your user. Okay, your website needs to be easy to navigate, so easy for your user to find information. It should be accessible and also mobile friendly. Now we're going to take a look at accessibility and mobile friendly in even more detail in following classes. Okay, so we'll have one class dedicated to just accessibility for the web and another class dedicated to mobile friendliness, or in other words, responsiveness of your website. All right, moving on, let's talk about easy loading. Your website should load fast. Nobody likes your website that takes too much time to load. Okay, so which means that you need to optimize image sizes, which means you need to make your images as small as possible in terms of file size, while not making your resolution too poor. So there's like a balance between resolution and file size. You also need to combine your code into a central CSS or all your scripts into a central JavaScript file, because this reduces HTTP requests. So the good news is we have already been learning to do things this way. Okay, we have HTML separate of CSS, right? And you also need to compress HTML, JavaScript, and CSS for enhanced loading speed. Next, we'll look at easy navigation. Okay. Study shows that visitors spend more time on websites that has easy navigation, which means when they're able to find the information that they need, easy navigation enables this, right? If it's easy to navigate, it's easy to find information. It means that users spend more time on the website because they can find their way around and look for the information and get the information that they need. So you need to create a logical page hierarchy. Your pages, the way that they're connected to each other, need to make sense to the user. You need to have breadcrumbs, meaning that, breadcrumb at the top showing you where you are and why you're there, and also design clickable buttons enabling the user to get from place to place. Follow the 3-click rule so that the users can always get to the required information within 3 clicks. No information should be too buried. Consistency is something that we'll talk about a lot. Consistency has to do with matching the design elements throughout on each of the pages. The font styles, headings, subheadings, and button styles must all be the same throughout the website. Don't make it different just for the sake of, trying to be creative or just trying to have fun and making things different. Everything should be consistent unless there's a really good reason for it to stand out. So when we use CSS, cascading style sheets, when we use CSS, this helps us keep the consistency. So all the headers on every page will look alike, all the links will look alike. So this is all about keeping things consistent in terms of styles and elements throughout the website. Next is following standards. So over the years, designers have trained users to accept certain items in certain location and to do things a certain way. So when you ignore these standards, it means that users have to learn something all over again. So you should really obey the standards that are already out there, unless there really is a truly superior, truly better way, and that's why you're doing things differently. Okay, for example, a vertical scrolling is standard. Most websites, you have more content than you'll see at first, so you scroll vertically. Okay, so horizontal scrolling is not standard. It's not encouraged. That's not the standard way to do things. But if there is a case where Horizontal scrolling does make more sense. It truly is a better way than vertical scrolling for whatever reason. You can use horizontal scrolling, but you have to have a truly better reason and not just use horizontal scrolling just because you're trying to be different or trying to be creative, okay? So usability comes first before trying to be, different for the sake of being different. Like I said, we'll be covering usability in even more detail in the next PowerPoint. So next we're going to look at content when it comes to website design. Content really is king. Content has to do with the web content, the way that your website content is actually written. It has to do with information architecture and has to do with navigation. Okay, the ultimate purpose of the visitors, why they're on your website, is to get information. Be it information about products that they're going to buy, or information about a news article they're interested in, or information about applying for a job. They're really there to get information. So make sure that your website communicates this information clearly. You have to organize information by making use of headlines and subheadlines, cutting all the jargon, meaning the terminology should be usable, should be easily understood by the person that is going to read the website, okay? You should also use a lot of bullet points rather than long, wordy paragraphs, okay? Unless it's a news article, unless somebody is there to actually read something, if you're just providing quick scannable information, it should be in bullet points. When I talk about content, it also includes videos and high-resolution imagery, not just text. So good content is also important for SEO, search engine optimization. When thinking about content, use words, phrases, and concepts that are familiar to the user. Make information appear in a natural and logical order. Quality content is useful, clear, and it guides your audience towards actions that you want them to take. SEO should be planned for and woven into the content. SEO meaning, like, if you are trying to make use of keywords should be thoughtfully and tastefully sort of immersed into the content in a conversational tone, and integrate phrases that don't distract from your message. So don't just kind of bombard your page with lots of keywords hoping that it will improve search engine optimization rankings, because it will not. The algorithms from Google and from other search engines do take this into account. They know when you're just filling your content full of keywords. So they're a lot more intelligent than that. You have to use your keywords well, but also use it meaningfully. So always define your site's purpose first. This helps to inform the content that you need. Adopt a content first approach. Content first approach means you work with real content from the beginning of the design process, because really you're creating the website for the content and not the other way around. You're not creating like an empty shell and then you're just going to stick content in and hope it works and plop it in later, because this will never work as well as you think it will. You have to shape your website around the content that's supposed to be on there. Real content makes it easier to spot changes that need to be made along the way, instead of making all the adjustments and overhauls at the end. Like if you make cookie cutter websites, you're going to have to make major changes maybe after you put the content in and realize that the website doesn't actually work for the content that you have. So basically, you don't really have to worry about website content information architecture and this component of the web project, as I've mentioned before, but it is something that you need to be aware of in the field of web design. Even though you're not responsible for the content, even though you're not going to be the one creating the content, writing the content, creating the information architecture, you still need to be aware of the importance of content when it comes to creating a website. So a website is not separate of the content that is going to house. Okay, so creating a website is not just about creating the HTML code and the CSS code. You also have to take into account the content that is going to live in the website. Just like when you're building a house, you cannot not think about the people that are going to be using the house. Or if you're building a building, you cannot not think about how the people that are going to use the building are going to use it. Is the building made for business people? Is the building made for religious functions? What is the building being used for? So same thing here, when you're creating a website, what kind of content is going to live on this website? It's something that you really have to take into consideration when you are part of the web project. All right, so moving on, I want to talk about visual design. So visual design has to do with color scheme, layout, typography, and graphics. So let's begin with typography. Always tie your typography into your brand identity. Your typography should be visually appealing and readable for visitors. Okay, so two things here. Your typography should be visually appealing, meaning it should be interesting, it should look good, it should tie into your brand identity, it should connect with your brand, and it should also be something that your visitors can actually read. If you use too fancy of a font type, then your readers might have trouble actually reading the information that they're there to get. Okay, so number one priority is always making sure that your readers can get the information on your website. Okay, so just going back a few steps, when I'm talking about typography, I mean the font family, the font face that you're going to use for all the text on your website. Okay, so use fonts that are easy to read. For the web, use sans serif fonts for the body text. Okay, so for the headers and links, you can use other fonts that are more interesting because they're smaller chunks of text. So you can use cursive typefaces or other decorative typefaces. They may work well for headings, but remember that they're not practical for large blocks of text. So when you're using text for your whole body paragraph, then you don't want to use cursive typefaces or decorated typefaces. Same as, if your font is really small, like if you have small footer font, then you don't want to use a very decorative font. You want to make sure that people can actually read it easily. Next, remember that typography shapes perceptions. The font face, the font family that you choose, the typography that you choose is really a vessel for your thoughts, for the words. It's sort of like, the way you talk, changes how the words mean to the other person. So typography, font faces are kind of like that. The way that the text is presented changes how people understand the content. Okay, so along with the actual words, the shapes and stylization of the letters really convey meaning. Typography translates an author's idea into a visual representation. Is this supposed to be read quietly, or is this font shouting at you? Okay, so the wrong font can really undermine an important content. If it's supposed to be very businesslike and important, you don't want to use a playful font. If it's supposed to be font that's talking to children or for a younger crowd, then you don't want to have font that looks too serious and too heavy. Okay. So here's an example here. So this is obviously has to do with children, this website. So we have some playful kind of like handwritten type font here, and it really, it really speaks to the audience. You can see that this font is actually only reserved for like the header, right, or the heading. Okay, hi and R2 and the brand really ties into the branding also. And for the subheading here, still a little bit playful, but not so much handwritten, becoming easier to read. And you can see that for links and for the text, they just use kind of regular, more plain type font so that people can actually read the text. Okay, and here it's very business-like, very straight, very proper, very solid, very strong, trying to appeal to those aspects. This is obviously a more serious site. And over here, again, a bit more lighter, more interesting, kind of playful use of font for this website. And same as over here, or lighter, more sunnier feeling as opposed to the business site. So think about, how this website would look if it was using the same kind of sans serif heavy font here. It wouldn't have the same light feeling, right? All right, so fonts should really suit both the placement choice and the tone of the design. So think about the typeface for every design element. Like what are you going to use for the headlines? What are you going to use for the body text and the buttons and so on? All Right, next we look at colors and imagery. Overall, design must reflect the brand and visually connect with the audience. So the visual appeal of your website contributes to the brand awareness and increases credibility. Okay, your website is usually for an organization or for a brand, and this brand or organization already has their logo and their brand colors. For example, FDU already has, the red and a certain very particular tone of red and blue, and these are the colors associated with the university, and you want to use these colors throughout your website to kind of immerse and kind of make connection to the university, to the brand. Okay, so you don't want to kind of throw any colors that you like into it. It has to be a continuation of the brand's identity into the website. All right, so make sure that you always use the brand colors or use colors that work with the brand colors when designing your website. A perfect color combination attracts users, while a poor combination can lead to distraction. If you're using purple and yellow for an FDU site, it can be very distracting and people will be wondering why this color combination instead of the university colors, right? So also avoid using too many colors. 3 or 4 tones for the whole website are more than enough to give an appealing and clear design. If you go to any good well-designed websites, you'll see that that is probably the maximum that they use. And the same with images. Don't overuse vibrant images. That's great if you have a lot of great images to use. You can rotate them. You can change the images now and then, but don't put too many on the same page. It can be very distracting. Okay, so the colors are what set the tone. The palette you choose for design really communicates a lot. Colors can be playful, like for that kids website that I showed you, or it can be very serious, like that business site that I showed you. Okay, a color scheme can do a lot to reflect a brand spirit and message. So you can see here, very kind of soft, pastel-y colors, very girly, very feminine, very light, right? And you can see this one using these colors, very purple, loyal, royal colors, very business-like, okay, a bit darker, more serious tone. So when you're choosing colors, always start with a primary color. The primary color should match your existing branding, and then choose your additional colors. Consider color complements. So every color has a counter color that makes it pop. A blue circle on an orange background pops more than a blue circle on a green background, right? So think about blue and orange together in your mind, and then think about blue and green together. So blue and green kind of close to each other and doesn't really pop as much, right? So make sure that only 1 or 2 colors on top of your primary color. More than that, then you're going to be struggling with clutter, with too many colors, okay? So after you've chosen your primary color, your main color, and then you've chosen your additional color that's meant to pop against your primary color, then choose a background color. And your background color should be more plain, okay? But first, let's talk about the primary color first. The primary color is a main color, and it has to do with the energy of your product or service. So red implies excitement or happiness. Orange usually implies friendly or fun tone. Yellow is optimism and happiness. Green has to do with freshness, or usually associated with nature, depending on what tone of green it is. Blue also, usually reassures the user, reassures the viewer, symbolizes dependability, reliability, often used in business sites, okay? And then there's purple for a distinguished brand that implies history or quality. Brown implies a reliable product, also used in nature. Black implies luxury or elegance, and white implies, sleek, user-friendly products. Oftentimes I think of TELUS, right? They use a lot of white in it. Then after you've chosen your primary color that symbolizes what your brand's about, then you can choose an additional color. So think about color complements. Every color has a counter color that makes it pop, right? The example I gave is if you have a blue circle on an orange background, it pops more than blue on green. Make sure that you only have 1 or 2 colors on top of your primary color. Don't make it more than that, please. Then is the background color, and it's actually the most important part is the background color because it takes up more space than any of the other colors. You can go for a more muted version of your primary color to really solidify your branding. So for example, if your primary color is green, you can go for like a really light green or softer shade of green. If you really want to kind of reaffirm that green color, or you can use a gray or white overlay in the background text for the text to show up, or you can use the off-white color for the background. This is the most common choice. Not actually a white, but something that's really close to white, just a few shades off. It is mild and inoffensive. If you use white, there's usually too much contrast because white is actually very stark and very clean. So usually, even though what you think is white that you're seeing on websites is usually a little bit of an off-white that kind of gives it that softer look. So that's always a good option for your background color. Next, we talk about white space. So white space, buttons, and other visual elements really help your content to stand out. The white space is what prevents your layout from being cluttered. White space is actually known as negative space, and it's a very important aspect of any design. So white space doesn't actually have to be white. If your background color is beige, you know, the part where there's nothing on your website is actually called the white space, even if the color is beige or yellow. Okay, so think of white space more as the visual breathing space. Okay, so over here on the left is, you know, this is the same ad, but on the left, you can see that there's not a lot of white space. Like every part of this page is kind of taken up. But on the right here, you have white space here. White space means space with nothing on it, like a negative space. Okay, so when there's white space, it allows you to breathe and allows a kind of like a more freeing feeling. Okay, so over here too. So over here, white space there because there's nothing there. It allows you to have space visually. So think about a room. If you walk into a classroom and from wall to wall were tables and chairs all packed in there, then you would feel very claustrophobic, or you feel like very crowded when you walk into the room. But if you walk into a room, the same size room, but there's less chairs and tables, it just feels like more sense of an openness, right? So that's what you want to achieve with your web page. Next, I want to talk about choosing a typeface color. So the color doesn't just apply to, you know, the background colors, right? That's also your typeface. You might go for the easy choice and choose a black, but if you actually look around on the internet, you find that a pure black typeface isn't as common as you think. It's not actually black that you're seeing. And the reason is because a black typeface on a white background can be very straining because there's 100% contrast. It actually leads to eye strain, and eye start to hurt when you're reading. So what people usually use is a gray or a gray tinted color, so an off black color, to give your website a softer, more inviting look. So usually an off-white color with off-white color for the background with an off-black color for the typeface. And together, even though they look like they're black and white, really creates a less jarring kind of experience for the reader. Colored typefaces should be reserved for links and important bits of information. So if you're going to make your text colored, only make important information colored, like links or, you know, things that need a call to action or something you're trying to emphasize, okay? And use them very sparingly. Next is imagery. Images keep people engaged, right? Interesting pictures relate to people and draw people, and they want to look at your site because of, you know, what's on that page that has to do with that imagery. So every design element should reflect and communicate a brand's identity. Don't just put an irrelevant image on the page just to, you know, get people to look at your page. Make sure that what is in the photo also relates to the content that has been written. Okay, so photos and other graphics really balance out text and also break up the web page. If you just have, you know, paragraph after paragraph of text, it can be very exhausting. So you want to give eyes a rest, right, from reading. So a picture, some text, a picture, some text, that really breaks up your page. So your visuals should always be high quality and look good. If you have an image that you really want to use, but it's low quality, then don't use it, okay? It's better to have no image than have a very bad resolution image on your site. So always use clear, color balanced photos and graphics with good size and resolution. Don't use images that are too small and no one can make out what it is anyway. So bad visuals can really ruin a great design. And make sure you organize your content. Okay, header text should be used to structure content. Use header text. If there's a chunk of content there, a chunk of paragraph, always have a header text that kind of is scannable, explains to the user what this is about. Okay, don't have all the finalized. If you don't have all the finalized content before starting your design, just use headers. Okay, to kind of decide, what content is going to go where. Visual elements should be organized. Define sections with images and graphics that are going to complement the written content that is related to the content. Okay, and make sure that you go for harmony. Every important element of a layout should really work together. Sometimes we make certain things stand out, but we must have a good reason, okay? If we're gonna make something pop from the rest of the page, have a good reason. If the oversized button in a contrasting color doesn't have good reasons, then don't make it oversized and contrasting. If it's just another regular button that is not any more important than any other links, then don't make it bigger and don't make it a different color, okay? Always have a good reason why you're making something pop. Because when things pop out, they distract and interrupt the user experience. And sometimes you do want to alert the user and make things pop up, but do this sparingly. Don't overdo it. Do it when you really need to. Okay. And finally, keeping it simple. Putting too many elements on the page can lead to distracting visitors from the main purpose of your site. If you're popping buttons everywhere and too many images everywhere, then when users get to your site, they forgot why they're there and they're just trying to look for information. All your popping things and beautiful images are just really distracting them from trying to get to the information. Remember that the visitors are there to get information, so it's your job to find out what information they're there to get, and is your pictures and buttons helping them get that information. Okay, keep your design as simple as possible so the visitors can find their way around your website easily. Again, use white spaces as they avoid your website from a big clutter and mess. Think of white space as, again, visual breathing space. Think about when you step into a room, you want it to feel open and inviting, and that you get to see the one table and one chair that you want to sit at. You don't need to see 50 tables and chairs all crammed into the room, right? Just give them what they need only, and use the white space to create that openness for them.